So hello, handy viewers, handy listeners, such as you are to this, the Beard Means exclusive reveal of both the Morticians and the Ratcatchers guilds. I am joined by my good friends and erstwhile companions, Mr. Conor Rooney.
Hello!
And Mr. Ben Harris.
Hello!
Nice copy. I enjoyed that. So let us start at the top, gentlemen, with the two captains for the Morticians, because yes, Morticians do now have two captains. Obulus, he's perfect. He's not changed at all. I love it.
Yeah.
I have my local meta here in London. Across the WhatsApp group, spent many an hour describing all the ways they thought that Obulus was going to change, and none of them have happened. Ben, sorry, I think I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I love the long detailed thought process and all the carefully crafted changes that he needed, which was none.
Yeah, absolutely perfect. He's, I mean, he's still got exactly the same flaws in my mind. All of his defences are based around his playbook or around melee in general. I still don't want to put him anywhere near people that have a considered range game. But he's still phenomenal. I'm sure that all of the changes to Season 4 will impact him in some way whatsoever. But at this stage, I think I need table time really to determine what that is. So unless anyone has any real things that they want to bring up about Obulus, I suggest
he's basically got the best legendary play in the game and the best character play in the game. Enough said.
I mean, exactly. You're absolutely right. It is the best legendary play because it's the only one that works when it's not being used. It's brilliant. It hangs over. It hangs over the field of battle. I was going to say over the pitch of Guild Ball. In exactly the way that a hovering murder of crows should do. Scalpel, on the other hand, I think it's fair to say not the most popular of captains since her inception.
She was the hipster choice, and you had to be a true dedicated hipster to play her, because Obulus was just so much stronger.
And
I think there were.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. I think there were a couple matchups she actually was the correct choice. I actually think she was better into Corsair than Obulus, and I think Mason's people liked her. But realistically, I think she kind of fit into the it's good if you have her on a sideboard, but you don't really need her.
Yeah, I mean, you could, and people did do perfectly well with just Obulus in their roster. I think it's fair to say. You look at the likes of Charles O'Nurser and David Cameron and Timmy, people that just soloed Obulus, and yes, they're very good players, but also they didn't need anything from Scalpel that the other wasn't bringing. Personally, as a less good Morticians player, I liked her into Blacksmiths, into Masons for the anatomical precision and the manipulation of models. I liked her into Hunters and later Falconers because Obulus doesn't do well into ranged combat. And much towards the tail end, on your recommendation, Connor, I was dropping her into Fish purely because she could reach them. Like, she could go, she can go anywhere she wants on the pitch. And with a 7-9 movement and old second wind and unnatural stamina, and later Midnight Offering from Hemlock, she could be wherever you wanted her to be, which was a phenomenal way of threatening Scalpel, and particularly with that high attack and lower tackle than Obulus, she was quite good at getting the ball back from them. However, everything's changed. So Scalpel is one of those models that people have seen for a little bit of time. Ben and I had the pleasure of playtesting Scalpel back in July, he said tentatively. And
yeah, one in June, one in July.
So let's start with the big thing on Scalpel's card. I think it's fair to say, one, her former legendary of Voodoo Strings, which is an 8-inch pulse of pushing models immediately directly towards them. I never used this on more than one model, I think, in the entire time of using Scalpel. I don't want her engaged by 2 or 3 or 4 models, but I would frequently do it to pull models back in that had counterattacked and double disengaged, or Flint, hitting where they go on the counterattack, something like that. But the new Voodoo Strings, the 6-inch aura. During this model's activation, when it damages an enemy model with one or more playbook damage result, choose a model within this aura to suffer a 2-inch push. Each model can be pushed by Voodoo Strings only once per turn. Now, this works on her, this works on friendly models, this works on enemy models, and I think it's fair. I've said it a few times on this podcast, and it bears repeating that any sort of ability that has direct impact on the model's positioning on the table and multiple models on the table is absolute gold dust. Connor, we talked about this with the navigators, navigator captain whose name somehow escapes me immediately.
Windfinder.
That's the one. We talked about this at the same time. I'm blown away by Voodoo Strings. Like, there could literally be nothing else on her card, and she'd be worth considering.
It's kind of like Ox's aura, to be honest.
Okay.
In the way that it, and this is something that Jamie and co have said as well, is that it's so core to her design that really everything else works around it, much like Ox is his aura. Everything else he does is to support that aura. And I think Scalpel's kind of the same, where if you're not getting value out of Voodoo Strings, she's not a good captain. And you need to get better value out of it. But what it can do is just mind-boggling. And I think a lot of new Morticians players are going to really struggle on clock with this one as they overthink things.
Yeah. I think it's going to be a case of pick what you want to achieve with Scalpel. Have an idea of what you want to achieve with Scalpel's activation and do that. And if you then have influence left over, cool. Like, you know, if there's an enemy model within 4 inches or slightly less of the board edge, which with Voodoo Strings and Spirit Bomb, which her new AoE ability, triggerable momentously on 4 or payable with 2 for a AoE effect, which does 2 damage and a 2-inch push with a 4-inch range. Between that and Voodoo Strings, anyone within 4 inches of the pitch is, let's be honest, going off the edge of the pitch if Scalpel can have anything to do with it. But yeah, it's going to be so easy to overthink things and just try and do too much. The anatomical staying is amazing. The playbook is so much easier to read.
So much easier to read. The old one is, oh boy.
Yeah, it kind of goes, 1 tackle 2 on the first 3, and then momentously from there. And if things don't have an additional effect on top of the momentum, they then did more non-momentous damage. It was just kind of clunky.
Yeah, it was a bit.
Never really.
Her new one's quite interesting, actually, in that it's got a really weird end of the playbook where she goes from momentous 3 on 5 to momentous 2 dodge on 6 to 4 damage on 7.
Yeah, it's been a theme of Scalpel's playbooks, is that, like, if you have a momentous damage result, you can have the same non-momentous damage result with something else. So that third column on Scalpel's playbook is, to me, the most Scalpel column, if that makes sense, because you've got either momentous 2 or 2 non-momentous dodge. That's always kind of how she's played in my mind. Is you can either have the momentum or you can have the damage and an extra effect.
Yeah, it ties in with your kind of your 4-1 straw man.
Yeah,
you're probably going to be hitting that column 3, so that's kind of where she needs to be tuned towards, I guess.
Yeah, and I can guess that people aren't happy, or not unhappy, but less pleased that the one momentous damage push dodge on 3. Which was probably what people used her for most, to taxi people around or push them off the edge of the pitch, and whilst doing a tooled up momentous 2 damage quite frequently. That's gone, but I think the gain from Voodoo Strings and the gain from Spirit Bomb far outweigh that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that happened to me in playtest is I remember setting up the Hunter trap. I think it was on Graves off the top of my head. Engaged by Vet Minx, damage, J-Car's all primed to go in. Then Scalpel activates, literally flips it on me. So suddenly all the Morticians are now engaging J-Car. And then he fell over in short order. But it was just kind of, everything went from kind of being perfectly set up for me to being perfectly set up to the Mortician. And she still had a couple of influence spare to get started herself. So,
Yeah.
The control that gives you, you can't express it with, just a simple push or a dodge. It's extra damage than that one push dodge and potentially so much more manipulation of the enemy team.
Yeah, I similar. The same playtest. I put Scalpel into Furnace. Furnace is all of a sudden a very sad 3-1 because of the anatomical precision, and she quite happily stabs him up. Does a little bit of damage, not a great deal, but all of those apprentices that had activated and were enjoying Sentinel auras suddenly aren't. And they're very, very fragile, and it's something we've said privately, and I think we've said it publicly as well after the Scalpel car got revealed. Someone is going to take Scalpel and be good with Scalpel and ruin people. Absolutely ruin people. Because if that kind of level of play where you can envisage board state well, she is the queen of that now. The elevator pitch that I've heard described both in person and a couple of other places by Jamie was that Obulus is the captain that controls one model really, really well, and Scalpel is now the captain that controls a 12-inch bubble on the pitch of where people are, and that's massive.
You know what it kind of reminds me of, actually, in a weird way, is how Corsair he's not the best fighter, but the reason Corsair does so well, at least he did in Season 3, is because between him, Gutter, and Hag, you have so much control over where everyone is on both teams.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Between Scalpel and some of the other stuff they have, include memory, dodging around, vet hemlock, the amount of control over the scrum this team has is going to be incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and it keys into what's been said to be one of their weaknesses is kind of their lower wound count. And you can with this sort of ability you can help protect those more vulnerable models a lot more than you used to be able to.
Yeah. When she activates in the turn is going to be key. And I do weirdly, although Obulus does have almost option paralysis whenever you play him, because of you can do anything you want, absolutely anything you want with Obulus, but it's just how do you then mechanically make it happen? Scalpel, I think, as you were alluding to earlier, Connor, it's going to hit people on the clock, and it's also just going to hit people mentally taxing them. Just how do I make the things that I want to happen? I do really love that she is a 1-inch melee model with a way of getting back into combat after the inevitable counterattack. So cool, you double push her away, but with Spirit Bomb, you're coming right back to her, assuming you hit it.
The other interesting thing I found with what they've done with her is they've actually not only lowered her health, but I think her counterattacks are significantly worse.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that push dodge, I mean, it only really mattered against other 1-inch reach models, but if you say like Pinvice Fillet never really threatened her that much before because she could pretty reliably hit that.
Yeah.
Or at least threaten to hit it enough that they wouldn't want to put her in. Whereas now she's a bit of a target for 1-inch reach models, especially mid to late turn if she's already done a push on them and herself.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's only her activation. Yeah. So she's
she's
a bit of a victim for 1-inch reach beaters compared to what she was before.
And I really like that because you can go in with her, you can try and rearrange the scrum, you can try and do all this fancy stuff, and please do, because that's exactly what she's for. But if at the end of all that she's left in anything of a vulnerable condition, she's dead.
Yeah, but she's got plenty of. I love that how mortician-y it is, for want of a better phrase. That yes, if somebody just gets that clean turn of hitting her, she's in all sorts of trouble. But actually lining that up, when she can potentially say, drop gas next to your missile model, and now you've got a whole different set of problems to get away from gas to try and get her.
Yeah.
She can put herself around a corner and then second wind away. She has options.
It's like if rage goes in, and I mean original rage, not vet rage. If rage goes into her, she's in real trouble.
Yeah.
But where you're going to have to protect her is blocking those charge lanes with other models. Yeah, if you've got anyone that's within 6 inches of Gast, then they will now be engaged by Gast, like within 2 hits.
Yeah.
And again, using the original rage as an example, that's a very sad original rage because he doesn't have the influence to be able to attack Gast because of fear. That's one of my favourites.
Fear.
She's just. I'm going to miss Wake the Dead. I'll be completely honest. I will miss that. Putting Wake the Dead on memory to make him a Def 5 model that immediately comes back again at full health. I really enjoyed doing that because it just made people not attack memory. And as anyone that's played or watched my Morticians games know, memory is a big part of that. But I accept that Wake the Dead had to go considering everything else she's gained, and she's gained so much.
Well, the one thing on her playbook that we haven't really touched on because it kind of falls into the slight change compared to the rest of it is her knockdown coming down from 6 to 5 actually brings it up on a parting blow against a 4-1 model from 25% to 50%, which makes her a lot scarier to walk away from.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Counteracting that, though, so on the other side, her loss of slippery. Do you think that's going to be a factor, or is just the simple fact that I can stab you and push you 2 inches away pretty much mean that you're not going to get a parting blow?
I think basically the second part most of the time, and the fact that second wind is a dodge now means that you can just get out that way anyway.
Also, I think it's worth noting
the only time it'll probably be annoying is when she needs to just walk away from someone to get a shot on goal.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if it was still there. But I don't think it's because of how mobile she is and how she can get out of people. That's going to be the interesting question: is when you activate her early, when do you use the pushes on various models is going to be quite tricky.
Yeah.
She's one of those. It's like you need a plan when you activate her,
100%.
and then you commit to that plan rather than go actually, because at that point, you'll what's the phrase, analysis paralysis very quickly.
Yeah.
But if you've got a clear idea that you can go in right, so this turn I want her to do this, stick to that plan and execute it. She's going to be a nightmare.
And I think that's where her name says everything.
Yeah.
In that she is a Scalpel. She is going to be able to do very, very fine finesse work. And she's going to be able to do it incredibly well. But if you think you're going to just tool her up and use her as Vet Rage or something like that, it's not going to work as well.
I mean, you say that.
You can stick tool up on her, and you're going to hit that with an anatomical. You're going to hit that third column, pretty common. Words rich words. You're going to be able to hit it quite reliably. So what you're doing 6 damage, doing 18 damage through just attacks, and then with unnatural stamina, you're going to do another 3 damage for a fairly reliable 21 damage on something,
which will one round pretty much any captain in the game.
Yeah, Grange. But pretty much. But then what? Then what are you doing? Like, you're just going to casually walk away 7 inches and hope that no one can get to you. I'm not saying that's not a bad plan, and at some point there will be occasions when Scalpel can do that. But she can probably also, you're going to have to consider that it's not an auto thing. She's not Thresher. I think that's ultimately what I'm trying to say. Is that you can't just there aren't situations where you can just apply Scalpel to face and make all your problems disappear in the same way that you could used to be able to do with Thresher. No idea. Farmers were out.
I actually think her killing power is substantially higher than her old version.
Oh yeah.
And I think you're gonna see her one rounding a lot of things.
Yeah, but it just seems like a waste, because as in if all you do is kill, because for every hit you get on that kill, you can still be, saying dance puppet dance.
what's so great.
Yeah, exactly. Whilst she's one rounding hammer, for example, you can be resetting the entire Mason scrum. So maybe you can try and negate countercharge with their own players, and line up your own strike later, whilst killing their key piece.
So whilst yes, you are going to be able to murder someone quite happily with Scalpel, have a secondary effect of that in mind. So yes,
yeah, exactly.
Your Scalpel is going to go into calculus, and she's going to ruin her into the ground. What are all those voodoo strings doing? So I guess what we're saying here at this point is have that second part in mind, and if at any point when you're throwing dice into people and you don't move somebody else, you've wasted a significant portion of a card. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, because voodoo strings is free. It does not cost you anything else to do.
It's so good.
And
it's not a resource question. It's just as you say, board state awareness, a finesse question.
Even if you're just moving people out of cover,
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's worth its weight in gold. Connor, I think I talked over you, which is ironic and a new experience for me.
Well, I was about to say she's really good at one-rounding captains that don't have a great counterattack. But the crazy thing is, not only can she get back in, she doesn't actually lose any of her killing power by getting back in, which is quite different from someone like Vet Rage or Honor, who can also get back in, but it's basically 2 influence where they're not doing any damage. Whereas if she Spirit Bombs back in, after the first attack with unnatural stamina, she's doing what she would have anyway.
Yeah.
And basically her killing power is unaffected, which is terrifying.
Yeah, as long as you hit that Spirit Bomb, you're back in, or they've come back to you, and you've lost either an influence and done the same amount of damage, or you've lost a momentum, and now you're doing more damage. Oh, she's good.
She is really scary.
Do you need a minute there, Rich?
A little bit. So the question then, gents, to close out this sort of first look at the changes, looking at Obulus's perfection and looking at Scalpel's. Let's be honest, she's now a perfectly viable captain in Morticians. I don't think anyone is arguing that. And she's no longer a bluff in the roster when you put your 12 down as it is now. Has any of the matchups changed? I think that's the big question. Okay, Colin, where do you think matchups have changed?
Well, so this is an interesting one because I think coming from someone who mostly plays Fish, the reason you play Corsair is because he's really good into Obulus.
Yeah.
But I think
and Shark's terrible into Obulus.
Scary into Corsair. Whereas I actually think Shark has a lot of game into Scalpel because she'll kill a model a turn, but there's no scrum to rearrange.
Yeah.
And you're quite spread out, so I'm not that scared of her in that way. So I think it kind of creates a lot of, kind of like the Mason's Fish matchup where you're trying to guess what your opponent's captain choice is while making yours.
And I suppose, of course,
always really fun.
With Corsair, whether that... Corsair never stands somewhere by himself. He's always got Sakana for that weak point, if he's still got weak point. I'm theorising at this point. Hag to moving him around. There's always somebody with him. Is the point I want to make with Corsair. So cool. Here's a tooled up Spirit Bomb. I'm more than happy for that. I've always enjoyed Pelage into Corsair because hey, you're snared or you've just taken damage that your tough hide does nothing for. So I can see what you mean because I don't think any Fish player is going to put Shark into me because Obulus ruins Shark's day. And equally, like you say, Corsair ruins Obulus's day. But I think now Scalpel. I don't think she ruins Corsair's day, but she does a damn good job.
I probably still play Corsair, but it's a tough call.
Yeah. The big change for me in matchups is now Union, which would have happily been an Obulus thing all day long. But I think with Blackheart's repositioning nonsense, well, I can reposition you right back, and you're a 3-1 model against me, so that's a happy, fun time. equally against Vet Rage, it's like you've spent all of this time ensuring that your bloody coins are there, and you've got the crowd outs and you've got the gang ups. Now you don't. So I can honestly see me using Scalpel more into Union than I have done in the past.
I also think I don't think the Blacksmith's matchup necessarily changes, because I thought she was already probably the better choice into it.
100%.
But that matchup is going to become a lot more important, as I think you're going to see more of both Morticians and Blacksmiths in Season 4.
Yeah,
Scalpel will make Blacksmiths cry.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see a lot more of non-ferrite blacksmiths, I should say, because we saw a lot of blacksmiths this year, but it was really only the last couple months where you started seeing people playing the anvil and the furnace captains, and I think she's quite good for them.
Anvil and Sledge are an interesting one, because of course we've seen those spoiled a few weeks ago now, and with Anvil's legendary turn, what a hard counter to Voodoo Strings that is. It's just like, here's an aura of Stoic. I can only push you once with Voodoo Strings, and that's your Stoic, and then everyone's right back the way they were. So I guess Spirit Bomb is going to be incredibly important in that matchup, just for proccing Stoic.
Yep. Mm-hmm. The upside is at least it's pretty easy to hit against most of the Masters, and as long as you hit it against, say, Anvil, you don't actually need to proc Stoic on Sledge, because you'll just hit Sledge once and push Anvil out of Sentinel.
But he'll have it as well.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying you'll have to hit him with the Spirit Bomb, but he's a lot easier to hit than the 4 defense apprentices.
Yeah. I suppose with the bigger Ox aura, being able to manipulate people within that Ox aura, I still think I prefer Obulus for that. Just you walk away. It's funny.
I think Obulus is better in that matchup, because 6-inch aura is pretty hard to get people out of with a 2-inch push.
With a 2-inch push, but with a you there walk away, that's quite significant. Alchemists, who knows? Actually, there's no point going. There's absolutely no point going through many more of this apart from the ones we know, because by all we know, they could have changed by now already. So I think, therefore, with the captains, we shall leave it there and pick straight back up with Dirge and Cosset.